So this is August 10th, 2015. Tom Lysaght interviewing Marsha Gilpatrick and Sheila Banani. So I've got plenty of questions I'd love to ask you because you're so much a part of the history of California and of Los Angeles and the faith. And so I'm going to go back to what little I know that you can kind of fill in, hopefully. That your parents, Charles and Harriet, were raised Christians, is my understanding, and that they became Baha'is, I think, when Sheila was about 5 years old, through their landlord in New York. Could you fill that us in on that, please?
Actually, not in New York. They didn't become Baha'is till they came to California.
But the landlord was in New York.
They were the managers of the apartment complex, and they kept asking my mother we want you to come to a fireside. And Dad didn't want to come. He didn't want to go. Mom was the one that was interested.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh. And so they would have been like in their early 20s?
No.
They were married in 1928, and they came to California in 1937.
Okay.
So
The mom was about 23 and Dad was 21,
Okay.
maybe when they got married.
when they got married,
Yeah.
but by the time they came to California, 1937. Daddy was born, I think, 1906, and Mom 1905.
No,
you didn't say their last name, Wolcott, which
Harriet and
Charles and Harriet Wolcott.
So did they go to that fireside in New York?
Eventually, yes.
They did, okay. But they waited until they tell us then what their...
Well, what happened was they didn't really know what they were going to was called what we know as a fireside. They thought they were just meeting some people, friends of the manager of the apartment building in Manhattan where we lived. And when the Baha'is there knew that they were coming to California, Daddy wanted to work with Disney. They said, oh, you must meet these Baha'is in Beverly Hills, was the place that they knew a Baha'i. And so they recommended or wrote a letter or did something to connect Mom and Dad to the Baha'is here in Southern California. So when they came out here, they had that introduction. And within a year, as a matter of fact, it was August 1938, this same month, that they enrolled or were enrolled by the Los Angeles Baha'i Spiritual Assembly.
And was that the Willows to whom they were?
No, the Willows were not Baha'is at that time.
Okay, so it was another couple, another family.
The Bodys.
Yes, Mary and Ed Bodie were Baha'is here. And
They told
later
them to
became-
babysit their children. This is a couple of capacity. Teach them the faith.
So I saw a photocopy of the letter saying we have new members that I guess was from the local
From the Spiritual Assembly?
of Los Angeles. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Was it in their Baha'i Journal or something?
Well, it was actually, I think it was, there's an 8-minute YouTube about Charles that's beautifully done. And
That was the memorial done by National?
I don't know who did it.
Charles Nolly
Charles Nolly.
Oh, he must have
at
done
the
it.
National.
Okay.
He was
And
at the National
and that's
then.
where-
Yeah.
That was prepared for a memorial program at the
At the
So
National
tell us
Convention.
about, you were spoiled as children. You got to go right to the Disney studios. So tell us about that. What that was like. As
Well,
children.
Diane Disney would have a birthday party, and we would be in the theater, and they would show Bambi or something like that at her birthday party.
Oh my gosh.
Well, later, when we were in junior high and high school, the Disney girls, both Diane and Sharon, went to the same school that we went to, Marlboro School, here in Los Angeles. So we knew them as friends. Diane passed away, I think, just a year ago. Sharon before that.
You would actually, I think you had said once, you'd actually go to work and see the process, right?
You mean storyboards
Yeah,
and all
that.
that?
Mhm.
Yes, I remember when Daddy would, because he was head of the music department both at Disney's and later at MGM Studios. I can't remember, but I think it must have been just at Disney's. when they were recording, and he would be conducting, which he didn't do for every film, but the film that he did, and he felt it was okay, I remember being taken and watching,
I wasn't.
which for a kid,
too little.
is sort of boring. But seeing your dad waving a conductor's stick in front of a bunch of studio musicians, I didn't quite appreciate the unique experience that was. But what I really liked was watching the storyboards for the Disney cartoons. You know, that was, I thought that was great. That was like reading comic books on the wall.
So what was it like at that time being in the Baha'i community in Los Angeles? And tell us a little bit about that story, about how you decided whether or not you wanted to be Baha'is. Because I know you had a story about a book that you wanted to borrow from your father.
Oh, yeah.
What happened with that?
You want to tell a story first?
Well, I just remember when we were children, two different things. One was, at one point we were taken to LA. We were living in the Valley, but we were taken to LA, and there was an elderly Baha'i lady who was doing Baha'i classes for the children. Boring.
Sarah Kenny.
No,
Sarah
it wasn't Sarah Kenny.
Is that somebody else? I only remember Sarah Kenny.
No, I can't remember the last
her
name.
Mother.
It was her mother, Sarah Kenny's
Mrs.
mother.
Mrs. Duffield.
Yeah, Ella Duffield.
Oh,
Yeah.
she was an angel.
Well, boring, but I was littler.
Sure.
I have an excuse. Anyway, so what Dad did is he decided that he would teach us. So we would go on Sunday morning and we'd read the comics, and then he would tell little stories about the faith. And that was my first, what I remember is my first Baha'i education. We were actually older when we had to go over into LA for the classes. But eventually I was a children's class teacher at the LA Baha'i Center for little munchkins.
And then what was the story in which you, because I think you said that you didn't declare at 15.
No.
I did not declare at 15. I thought if I was going to be anything, I would probably be a Baha'i. But you know, I didn't have really a connection and with the faith. Then I'm going to skip the story I told you and tell another one. By the time I got to be 17, somehow I got a hold of a copy of Dawnbreakers, which was an excellent thing for me to be reading, as an adolescent. I highly recommend it. By the time I got through with reading Dawnbreakers, I wanted to be a Bobby. This was the most exciting. I mean, this was passionate belief in action. I loved it. So I was ready to be a Baha'i and really inspired by Dawnbreakers. Now, of course, becoming a Baha'i at that time, which was March 1950, required that you write a letter to the local spiritual assembly and ask if you may be considered a Baha'i. And then they would assign somebody, or at least this is what they did to me, assign somebody to study with you the Dispensation of Baha'u'lláh, written by Shoghi Effendi, the Will and Testament of Abdul-Baha, written by Abdul-Baha, of course, and then a major text like Baha'u'lláh in the New Era. These three things were mandatory, and the person they assigned to me was Elwin Van Zandt, who, anybody remembers the old history of Los Angeles will know the name Elwin Van Zandt.
Tony Lease was mine.
Oh, okay, another person. She was later.
And how old were you when you decided
15.
you were?
It wasn't much later. We're 2.5 years apart.
But
I'm the older one.
I actually think she declared, and then when I was 15, I declared.
So Marsha, you were born in 1935 and Sheila 33?
The end of 32. The end of December 1932. So you might think of it as 1933. Minus a day.
So what was it like, how many youth were here, and what was it like to be a young Baha'i?
There weren't any youth. I mean, when I...
Donald Witzel, Sheila Wolcott, and Marsha Wolcott were the youth committee.
Donald Witzel, who's now dead, was married to
Mignon.
And she recently died. They
He's a counselor in Latin
for
America.
pioneering in, I think, Venezuela.
It was, yeah.
So, but they were a young couple, and there weren't any young people my age. And besides, Los Angeles was then, as it is now, very spread out, and Baha'is scattered here and there, and getting together was not easy. So
I think the population was
didn't
under
really have-
500.
Larger Baha'i.
Formal Baha'is, I think, was under 500.
I don't remember, but there were certainly not many youth.
Good to go.
Okay.
You're good. So, if you don't mind, I just want to ask you a couple more questions about your parents, and then we'll move on. If I'm not mistaken, your father was elected to the National Spiritual Assembly in 1953, and before that, he was a member of the local Spiritual Assembly. Was your mother a member of the local Spiritual Assembly?
No. She did the LA Baha'i Journal. We went down there on a weekend, and she was with the addressograph, that old-fashioned addressograph. And she'd be tearing up people who'd moved out of LA and making new ones. And that was her job to put the LA Journal together.
And then, my understanding is that he was elected to the National Spiritual Assembly in 53, and in 60 he was elected secretary, or was it 61?
No, 60.
60, and that was when he left Hollywood, correct? So he
Yes.
gave up his career.
Yes.
Do you want to
Yes,
address
he
that
had
at
to
all?
move to Wilmette. That was a requirement that the secretary of the National Assembly live at the National Hazrat Quds. And so he and Mom had to leave. He quit. He was at MGM at that time as head of the music department. And he was, I don't know, in his 50s,
Yeah.
mid-50s. So he was far, really, from retirement age. So this was considered unusual in Hollywood. So Variety, which is, the trade publication for the entertainment industry, had an article in it about his leaving Hollywood for his religion.
And we'll back up in a second of those years about your own life, but let me just, one last thing, that in 1961 he was elected to the International Baha'i Council, correct?
Yes, the second one.
The second one. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about what that council, because a lot of the young Baha'is are not aware of what that was.
Well, they need to study Book 8, Unit 3.
Okay.
It's all about it,
All right.
for all the factual information. But I know that when he was elected to that and had to go over to Haifa, Mom packed all the things up and they went over there. And then she was ready in 63. She had the suitcases out and she was going to pack and get ready to go back home.
Oh. Because she felt, okay, once the Universal House of Justice is elected, then we'll be finished
That's right.
being part of the
Right.
council. Oh. And as we know, what happened?
Well, I had gone on pilgrimage. This was my first pilgrimage. And my husband came, who was not a Baha'i, my first husband, Mike Cuffle. And he stayed with my parents, and I stayed in what eventually was the House of Justice the building. I guess the Hands were living in there at the time. They were at the World Center. And that's where we stayed. And then we would, every night, the Hands of the Cause were coming for the big conclave prior to the election, the first election. And
That was the enclave of the Hands of the Cause.
yes, they were all there. And 27, 28 of them. And then Mr. Furatan was the one who led our pilgrimage. And he said, remember this pilgrimage. There will never be another one like this. It's a very special time. And we were the last group of pilgrims to go there because they closed down the pilgrimage in order to be able to do the election and do all of that. So nobody could be there at that time. So my husband and I were sent off to Italy to entertain ourselves. And then I said, well, I want to know what happens. So we'll be in Denmark or something. So no, it was Luxembourg. Please send me a cable. Just say yes or no. I still have the cable. Yes, I got elected. No, I didn't.
Oh, so you really were anticipating the possibility.
Oh, yes, I was.
Okay.
Mother wasn't.
Okay.
So I got the cable and it said yes. And then they met us and they came over and traveled with us and came back to the States because it meant, I guess, doing I'm not exactly sure what, because they didn't have a home there. But
Well, the London Conference was in 1963. Yes. After the election of the House of Justice at Rezvan, then everybody went to London. Of course, we had thought it was going to be in Baghdad. That Jubilee, or I think it was called Jubilee World Congress in 1963. As we were going through the 10-year plan, the crusade, the idea was that in 1963 we would all go to Baghdad because that's, a holy place for Baha'is. The House of Baha'u'lláh is there. And so it was not possible for world unrest reasons to have a big conference in Baghdad. So they changed it to London. And of course, London had a special significance by 1963. Yes. The Guardian had passed away in 1957 in London and was buried there. So having that 1963 conference meeting the first newly elected members of the Universal House of Justice was a wonderful occasion. And Marsha and I and our families were all there for that, 1963.
Now, Marsha mentioned being married at that time. Now, if I'm not mistaken, going back about 10 years, what year was it at UCLA that you met Amin?
I didn't meet him at UCLA. Oh. I had just graduated from high school, and this was 1950. I was 17 years old, and I was going to start UCLA in the fall of 1950.
And you had just declared that year, too, you said.
And I just declared. And I was full of fire and decided that we had to have a youth conference, even though there were no youth. We'd had to have a youth conference in LA, and it was around the time of the martyrdom of the Bab. So we centered the program around July 9th.
It was the 100th anniversary.
1950,
right.
Yes. And we called for all the youth of California to come to the conference in Los Angeles. It was held at 331 South New Hampshire. When the Bahá'i Center
house
was located there, the Los Angeles Bahá'i Center. And somebody contacted Amin. I had not met him. Amin and Shidan Fatazam. Amin was at Stanford, and Shidan Fatazam, the younger brother of Hushman Fatazam, who was elected to the Universal House of Justice years later.
With your father?
Yes.
And Shidan was a counselor in Africa.
So they came down from, Shidan was going to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I mean, as I said, was at Stanford. They came to the youth conference. This was like a 3-day youth conference. Nothing small, like an afternoon conference.
And you would help plan it?
Yes. So Amin was under the wrong impression that I was older than I was. And the end of the youth conference came. I won't tell you all the stories connected to the youth conference. There are lots of interesting ones, but that will be for another
time,
day.
another story.
At the end of the youth conference, Shidan Fatazam, who I thought was cute and funny, and I was interested in him, passed me a note that said, "Would you like to go out to dinner tonight?" This was the end of the conference, you know. We were having a picnic in Griffith Park at the time, and of course I thought it was from Shidan. So I said, okay. That night, they came to the house, and it was Shidon and another girl and Amin, and it was Amin's car, which was, I remember clearly, a Mercury convertible, red.
Red.
I like that. Then as we got into the car, Shidon and this other girl got in the back seat, so I realized Amin is my date. So that was how
The guy with the car.
I got to know Amin.
And what year did you marry?
Then that was 1950, July. He started a correspondence with me. You know, this was pre-internet days. And came and visited in the fall of 1950 when I started UCLA. By February 1951, which was, as you can count, just a very few months, we were married. I won't tell you why we got married then. That has to wait for another day.
Okay. But I guess you're implying if you knew your real age, you might not have courted you? Is that what you were saying?
Oh, yes, I forgot to say that at dinner that night that we went to a Russian restaurant on the Sunset Strip called Bublichky's, which is out of existence now. Amin asked the question, assuming, you know, that I had finished college, although I had not yet started. He said something about, well, what had I majored in college? And when I said, well, I'm just starting UCLA in September, he said, how old are you? And I said 17. I didn't become 18 till the end of December. So that was a bit of a shock, but I didn't realize it was because I was not paying any attention to his infatuation.
Or motivations.
Later, he said that.
So how old was he then?
He was 23.
Oh, okay.
He was at a point in his life where he had finished the university, he had gotten his bachelor's in history at Stanford, he'd gotten his MA in history at Columbia University, then he came back to Stanford for his PhD. He had taken all his coursework, and he was preparing for his oral exams, his doctoral oral exams, for those of you involved.
All right, let's go ahead and stop.
So now, the 10-year crusade was about to begin. So I know you made some big life decisions relative to that. So why don't you tell us a little bit about also of course his parents. Tell us a little bit about that as well.
All right.
His parents came to London for the World Congress.
Yes, his 19, that was much later, 1963. We're back in the 1950s now.
Well, 53
Yes.
was when the 10-year crusade began,
Right.
if I'm not mistaken. But even previous to that, wasn't his father appointed head of the cause in 52?
Yes. So let me start
Okay.
with, we got married in February 1951. In November 1952, our baby Suzanne was born. We were living in Palo Alto, and Amin was teaching at Stanford. The 10-year crusade, the 10-year plan, it's called both, was coming out from Shoghi Effendi. And Amin and I thought that because his parents had gone pioneering in 1951, the year we got married, they left Iran and moved to East Africa to pioneer. So they were already, Amin's parents were already in the pioneer field before the 10-year plan began. Otherwise, I'm sure they would have been Knights of Baha'u'lláh. But they went as part of the British 2-year plan, 1951 to 53. Amin and I, thinking that we should go to Africa to join his parents as, you know, to be part of pioneering work, wrote a letter to his parents, sent it off to, they were in Kampala, Uganda, his parents at the time. Little did we know that they had left Kampala to go on pilgrimage. They were in Haifa, and Ali Naqshbandi, their son-in-law, had forwarded the letter to Amin's parents in Haifa. Amin's parents saw our letter in which we said, we're thinking of coming to Africa to join you. and they showed it to Shoghi Effendi. We didn't know they were going to do this. They showed it to Shoghi Effendi, and he said, no, they should not go to Africa. They should go to Europe. And I believe his thinking was that Amin's education and ability to contact people in Europe was more important for him to be strategically located in Europe. And there were pioneer goals in Europe, one of which was the one that we chose, which was to open the country of Greece. There were no Baha'is in Greece. So we arrived at our pioneer post in that first year of the 10-year crusade in summer of 1953. Our baby daughter was 10 months old by that time. I was not yet 21, I was 20. And so even if we had gotten an assembly, I couldn't have been one of the 9 members. But as it is, we didn't get our first assembly in Greece until 1956. 57, sorry.
Were you in Athens?
Yes, in Athens. So that takes us up
It certainly does.
through that.
Yeah.
And his father found out that he was asked to be a hand of the cause from Shoghi Effendi in person. That didn't happen to many hands of the cause. When he was on that trip in 1952 to the World Center, to Shoghi Effendi, he heard that he wanted him to serve as the hand of the cause. Amin's father.
Yes, yes. And where were you living in this period? Were you living there?
I was in high school.
So you were in Wilmette?
Mm-mm.
No.
No. I was in L.A.
This is the 50s, remember?
Oh, that's right. They hadn't moved yet. Okay.
Yeah.
They moved to...
Now, I never lived in Chicago, and I never lived in Haifa.
Oh, okay.
I visited.
And you also said, I'm sure, I'll ask Sheila to tell me about when she met the Guardian, but unfortunately you didn't have that opportunity.
The unfortunate thing is I was young and not too bright, and I could have written while I was there going to school. I came over and went to school my sophomore year of college.
In Athens.
I went to Stanford my first year. The second year I applied to go. I thought the whole family was going. Mom and Dad fooled me, and they said, oh yeah, we'll all go over there. And so I found out Belinda Childs Pierce College in Piraeus, in the seaport there in Greece, and I applied for it and went. And of course they didn't come. So I had my sophomore year there, and then I came back and changed my major and went to UCLA art major.
And what year did you meet Shoghi Effendi?
In 1956, April, May 1956. This was a year and a half before he passed away. I was pioneering in Greece at the time, and Amin went on pilgrimage in December 1955 while I stayed with Suzanne, our daughter, in Athens so that the post would not be empty. And then my turn came a few months later at Rizwan time, April and May 1956. And I was the only Western pilgrim there during my pilgrimage.
So she got to play with Ruhia Khanum all the time.
Dinner with Shoghi Effendi, conversations at the table. 7 nights and 2 nights in Bachi, sleeping in the mansion house in Bachi.
And what was that like? Was it one of those experiences that at the time sometimes we don't appreciate, or were you able to kind of really grasp?
I was 23 by that time, so and an old married lady. So I appreciated. Of course, I probably, thinking over the many years since then, I don't think I would have done anything differently. Maybe one thing which I will not include in this. Again, this is
For another day.
we'll keep this
What are some of the most
very elevating interview.
outstanding memories, the things that stick in your mind about about meeting the Guardian. I know a lot of pilgrims would talk about the terror they'd feel when he would fold his napkin because they knew that he was getting up to leave. You know, what are some of the things that you remember about him?
I remember, and usually when I talk about this with people, I include this, that he didn't waste a minute in just frivolous conversation. He used these dinner time conversations where there, at least I was one pilgrim there at the table, and then other people at the table besides Shoghi Effendi and Ruhi Khanum were the Hands of the Cause, Millie Collins, Mason Remy, Leroy Iowas, and his wife Sylvie Iowas, who was not a Hand of the Cause, but she was part of the International Baha'i Council that the Guardian had appointed. That was the first International Baha'i Council that was appointed. The Ravel sisters, Ethel and Jessie Ravel, Dr. Lotfullah Hakim, and Fujita served the food. So this was a group of
John Farabee
10 or
wasn't there?
11. No, John Farabee lived in England.
But he came later.
He was a Hand of the Cause, but not ever posted there in the Haifa. That the Guardian, in using these opportunities where these were the core workers for him. They had assignments in relationship with the State of Israel for the faith. They had care of the gardens. They had, concerns with what was happening with the properties there on Mount Carmel as well as in Batji. And at the same time, the Baha'is worldwide were having their national conventions all over the world at the time I was there, which was toward the end of April. And the temples were being designed in Uganda and in Germany. They were not constructed yet, they were still under design. So he would have an easel set beside the table with the latest design concept, and he would make comments about what he would like to see changed and ask Mason or Leroy to pass on his instructions to the NSAs affected by these designs. And then at the same time, he would have conversation with me. He, for example, asked, had I read his World Order letters? Fortunately, I had.
That's why I didn't go. I was afraid he'd ask a question I couldn't answer.
Because what he wanted to know is how much I knew, so he could talk in a way that assumed, that you have this background. And my questions circled around very practical matters. You don't know me, but I'm very practical.
Relative to Greece, was he talking to you about
Yes.
the work in Greece?
Very much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My goodness. Did your parents meet the Guardian?
No.
See, I thought not. Yeah.
No.
They didn't, did they? No. You were very fortunate. And he only had one more year to live, didn't he?
That's true.
Amazing. Boy. Did he look healthy?
Looked great. But of course, I being 23 and he being almost 60, he was old. But he did not look infirm in any way.
And where did you eat? Which building did you eat?
It was at number 7, Haparsim,
Okay.
number 7, Persian Street.
Was there any particular way you feel that the death of the Guardian affected you when you both heard? Where were you, Marsha, when you heard?
I was living with my parents in LA, and Dad came down the stairs. He was a member of the National Spiritual Assembly here in the States, and he said, "The Guardian is passed." And of course, I broke into tears, and he was crying, and Mother was crying, and it was a real shock.
Well, Amin and I were still at our pioneering post. We didn't have to leave the country until 1958, when we were no longer granted work permits and told to leave by the government. So we had to leave then. But in 1957, November 4th, we didn't know right away that he had died. The country of Greece, for the plan, for the 10-year plan, was under the direction of the German National Spiritual Assembly. And you would have thought that the German National Spiritual Assembly would have sent us a cable or something, but they didn't. Instead, my father, who, as Marsha just said, was at that time a member of the United States National Spiritual Assembly, flew to London for the funeral of the Guardian. And in London, he telephoned us in Athens, and he said, "Have you heard about Shoghi Effendi?" And Amin took that call. I touched the mic. Sorry. Amin took that call, and I thought he was going to collapse. I didn't know what was being said on the other end of the line. Didn't know it was my father. Didn't know what the subject was even. But Amin was just in disbelief to hear this news. And of course, there was nothing we could do but just absorb the reality of this shocking news. And Amin, for those people who knew Amin, he's a deeply emotional person, but it doesn't show on the surface. So when it shows on the surface, that's surprising to me.
Marsha, you said that your father was one of the pallbearers.
Yes.
Did he ever share any with you what that experience was like, or the funeral?
Not that much.
No. I'm going to ask you a question now, both of you. For many years I taught privileged young people, and I noticed something that I began to call the Hamlet syndrome, which was my own expression. In other words, young people whose parents were so prominent or successful that it was daunting to the young people. And so both of you come from, parents, and Amin as well. What was it like to kind of grow up in the shadow of prominent Baha'is? And Marsha, I'll ask you.
I thought it was just fine.
How so?
Perhaps because they weren't very pretentious. They would tell stories. Different Baha'is. Billy Collins came to our house for dinner one night. I mean, people would pass through, and I would see people, and I'd listen to the stories, and it just seemed that it was part of my life.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't feel as if that there were these great shoes that you had to fill, so to speak, or example to follow?
I don't think so.
No. Huh?
Probably we should have. That was
well, you have.
our fault, not our parents' fault. But the Baha'i community does not, I'll speak about those days. I won't say how it is now and in future. I hope it's like this. Baha'is consider themselves just Baha'is. There's no hierarchy of, being a better Baha'i. We knew that there were certain tasks that were needed for the benefit of the faith, and most everybody I knew wanted to do something to help the development of the faith. And people could do different things, depending on their age, their location, how they could move out in the world. I never felt intimidated.
Well, you got married and left.
Yes, I
She
left.
was in
I
different
was
community.
just 18 when
Yeah.
I got married, and went pioneering at age of 20. So I was out of the country for 5 years.
But we were active. We were active in the community. I mean, when I got married and moved north to Berkeley, I was elected to the assembly at 24. And so they were always very happy to hear whatever was happening in my life. And the only occasion I went once to a national convention, and I must have said something to my father, and he asked, would the convention give permission for me to speak on the convention floor, because I wasn't a delegate. So I was on the National Youth Committee, or I was doing something, and so I was understood that you were considered, it was important to be involved, to be active, to be part of the action. So we would, for years, we went to firesides at the Willows, and Sheila drove and I went along, and it was it Thursdays?
Maybe 1 year, because then I got married and left.
I know, but during that year, every Thursday, that's where we went, if we could go.
They were not married at the time.
Now, how about, did Amin ever share with you what it would be like to be the son of a hand of the cause? Did he feel that?
Absolutely not.
No.
First of all, his father became a hand of the cause after we were married.
That's true.
My father became a member of the National Spiritual Assembly after we were married. There were not that many Baha'is in the world. So, you know, everybody had to pitch in and do something. And some people were given certain assignments for a certain period of time, and
We all
that was
operated in different spheres,
Well, that's great. I mean,
but it was one Baha'i world.
And I mean, you both have become bedrocks of communities. You here in Santa Monica, and you in Northern California, so you certainly have followed their example. Sheila, tell me about, not many people get to take a road trip with two hands of the cause. So tell me that story.
That's a good one.
yes, that happened in 1953, before we left to go pioneering. There was the dedication in Wilmette of the beautiful Mashkolas car. Finally had been completed in 1953, and they held an international conference and the dedication of the temple. Ruhi Khanum came to that event, and Amin's parents came from Africa. His father at that time was a hand of the cause, and Guardian had asked Hands of the Cause to come to these international conferences that were held in different places in the world, one of them being in Wilmette, Illinois. And Mr. Samandari, Hand of the Cause, also came, among other. Dorothy Baker was there at that conference. It was a wonderful, magnificent event in Wilmette.
I was there.
Following, yes, and all our family went as well. Not Susie. We left Susie with my grandmother back here in Los Angeles. She was about 4 months old at the time.
Layla.
No, Susie, because this is 1953. Layla didn't come along until after 1962, when we had come back from pioneering in Greece. So at the end of this international conference and the dedication of the house of worship, Amin's parents, Musa and Sheila Banani, and Mr. Samandari were brought to California by car, which Amin and I drove, this car. And this was a trip from Chicago, essentially, to Los Angeles. Lasted a few days. I don't know if you want to hear any more about that, except it was
She wants the story of the movie picture.
When Amin wanted to go to the movies and he didn't know what movie to pick for Mr. Samandari.
Yes, Mr. Samandari did not want to risk going to movies. He would be likely to see things that he would prefer not to see. And Amin told him, well, this is a good movie. I think we were someplace in Nevada at the time. So this is a good movie.
Lots of animals in it.
Going to be with animals. What can go wrong?
Androcles and the Lion?
Androcles and the Lion, I think it was.
No, it was something with...
Anyway, while you're thinking of it. We took Mr. I'm not even sure I went that night.
It was a circus.
Amin took Mr. Samandari, and they sat in the movie, and everything was going along fine. He did not understand any English, but, you know, there were elephants and things like that. And then all of a sudden he noticed that there was a lady on top of the elephant who was dressed in a very short skirt and a very flimsy outfit, and he covered his eyes, and he said to her, I mean, you told me this movie was going to be a nice movie. So that was that. But then the good part, the really fun part was, and the memorable part, was at the end of the movie, Mr. Samandari, Amin tells this story. I know I wasn't there, but I've heard him tell this. Mr. Samandari grabbed a hold of Amin's forearm, strongest grip, he said. And he said, come, Amin, quick, let's go to the front of this theater and tell these people about Baha'u'lláh before they leave.
That's great.
And Amin said, he's often thought maybe he should have done that. Let Mr. Samandari have what he thought was important. He didn't, you know.
What strikes me about that is, you know, the not losing an opportunity to tell people about Baha'u'lláh.
Exactly. Not,
That was the hands and the
Here is a
counselors both.
captive audience. They've just seen this so-called religious film.
Yeah. So there was another story about the movie theater, I think you were...
No, this was about the road trip.
Oh, okay.
Driving on the road. Now, when I was driving, I myself, not Amin, I drive a little fast. And when we were going through Utah, places that were just desert, no traffic, daytime, not night, I was driving about 100 miles an hour. Now, you know, you hardly realize you're going 100 miles an
I didn't
hour.
know that.
And it's flat. Everything around it was flat. Apparently, Mr. Samandari, who was sitting in the back seat, and those of you who remember seeing him, you know, he was very short. So he had his arms crossed, I remembered, as I was driving, on the
Praying.
back, I think so, on the back of the front seat. And he said in Persian, which was translated for my benefit, he said of me, she's a lion, you know, of a driver. Anyway, I figured if I have two hands of the cause in the car, what can possibly happen? And surely nothing did. I was perhaps very lucky.
Well, you know what happened in 1982?
What happened?
With hands in the cars in a car in Haifa.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That was very
So
sad.
tell me the story about why one morning Mrs. Samandari couldn't come out in the morning.
Oh, in the house, yeah.
Do
you want to tell that story?
The story more.
Well, he didn't come out for the longest time, and we were worried. We had breakfast and finished breakfast, and he still hadn't come out. So I don't remember who went back finally and knocked on the door. We had one bedroom downstairs. It would have been probably like the maid's quarters, a bath and a bedroom off the kitchen area, and that's where he had stayed. And he had something wrapped around himself, probably a blanket, because he had washed his suit. He had one suit, and he had washed it, and it was hanging up
in the bathtub.
In the bathtub.
It
and it was hanging up
floating
to
in the
dry.
bathtub.
I think we had a dryer, but this is the way he did it. Washed it and hung it up to dry, but it hadn't dried yet.
Well, as I heard the story, it may have gotten embellished, but as I heard the story, maybe Mother sent Amin, because, you know, Mr. Samandari would have been
Speak English.
embarrassed if Mother had gone to the door and knocked. But anyway, Amin opened the bathroom door and saw this floating suit in the bathtub and was quite frightened for a minute. You know, what is happening? Has he slipped or fallen? But Mr. Samandari was not in the suit.
No, thank goodness. Do you have any other memories of that particular occasion when he was visiting the head of the car?
We were so interested in listening to the conversations and everything. And he did, I think, made one remark about the fact that you and I weren't up helping Mother clear the dishes and do that.
That you weren't.
Drawing the dishes. Drawing the dishes.
That we
It
were
was
still at
about-
the table when we should have been helping.
And my father, whose custom was, while Mother would wash,
He would
no
dry.
such thing as a dishwasher, you know. Mom was a dishwasher. Daddy dried the dishes. And they would have conversation at night. Mr. Samandri didn't understand this relationship. And so he said, why aren't these girls in there drying the dishes? Why is their father
washing and drying the dishes.
Washing and drying. Of course, we could think of a lot of other things to do instead of that.
Well, this is a good segue for me to ask you a little bit about marriage. I mean, it's a question we all want to know about, young people. So from your experience, we have examples of, from your experience, what are your insights as to whether or not the challenges, or when there are different cultures marry, in your case, or whether you choose a Baha'i or not. So anything you want to share about things that people could learn from your experiences and relative to that?
Good luck.
Yeah, lots of luck. Don't marry young, like I did. That's a very bad idea, I think. I would
I think
never
the faith
recommend
promotes
it.
marrying young, Sheila.
You don't know who you are.
Sorry.
Of course, you become whoever you're going to become under the circumstances. But you give yourself a chance to find out who you are before you blend your life with another person who wants to become who they want to become. It really is difficult. And with two cultures, even though you're both Baha'is, the strongest bond is the faith, which is a great, strong bond. But
The spiritual leg of the triangle.
I think you want to have more things going for you than just that. We hardly knew each other.
Do you have a different...
Well, I supposedly knew the man I was going to marry.
Supposedly.
Well, I was 24,
Oh, yeah.
and
Okay.
and I worked hard to try to make the marriage last because I was the Baha'i. He wasn't, but he was my mother used to say he was a little broken-winged bird, and that I was trying to pat him back together. That it was I was a mother figure to him, an enabler, because he was actually an alcoholic.
You
Finally
didn't
admitted that.
know that, though.
I knew he drank a lot, but he didn't interfere with my activity in the faith. I was on the local spiritual assembly, a lot of Baha'i activities. He was busy going to school. He was finishing at UC Berkeley. And then he got a good job. No, he went for a master's then, MBA. And then he got a job at Fairchild Semiconductor. We moved down to the peninsula, and that was the end. That's when I
But then, of course,
left.
you had a wonderful marriage with Ron. So tell us a little bit about that. You taught him the faith, and
Yes.
also, what like both of you addressed, it's just the difficulty of both of you losing a husband, and how that challenges one's faith. And
Well, I have an interesting perspective on that because I went through a divorce and I went,
Hold on 1 second. You said Ron lost a.
Ron was her husband.
Second husband.
Did he lose someone too? Is that
No.
what you're saying? Did he lose his wife or?
no.
No, both our husbands are dead. I think that's what he means.
Oh,
I
okay.
later
I just wanted to make
lost-
sure that it was correct because
Yes.
I was misunderstanding.
No,
Sorry to interrupt.
I realized I understood that's what you
Oh, okay.
said.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Just continue.
You might want to start with the question about.
So you said you had an interesting perspective when I mentioned about Ron. What were you going to say, or about?
Well, having been married, my first marriage, and of course I stuck with it much too long, 9 years, had 3 years of patience. I kept canceling him and starting him again, giving him extra chances. We had no children. There was not a lot of reason to do this, but I did. And then after the divorce, I knew I needed a job. I had been business office supervisor in the telephone company, but I had quit, and I decided to go back and get a teaching credential. So I did that at 33 and then got my first teaching job. And it was at the end of my first year of teaching that I was introduced to Ron, and that's a whole good story. But, okay. he didn't believe that I existed because when John, who was introducing us, gave him my telephone number, I had left right after the year ended and had gone for 2 weeks to visit Sheila. And he kept trying to get me on the phone. He called, every phone he went by, I think I'll just try dialing it. And I never answered. Then one day at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I answered the phone. And he didn't know what to say. And Ron was quite a talker, so for him to be speechless was amazing. So he said, I have a book that belongs to you. I had given hidden words to John, trying to teach him the faith. And so he gave it to Ron, who was going through a divorce. He had not completed the divorce. 16 years of marriage and 5 kids. And he didn't want that marriage to end. So he was working on it very hard, and Noreen really didn't want to be married. So when he introduced us, or when he talked about me, he said, she's kind of hung up in her religion. So he didn't know what was going to happen. He had dated a former nun, and he thought, but you know, when you're 34 years old and you have 5 kids, you're not used to being on the marriage market, per se. So we met. I would say that summer, June or so, I went to a summer school, and he was acting as principal of it. It was to make games and things for your classroom. So that's where we met. And by December, we were married. 1970. December 26, 1970. And the reason we got married then was because he finally, I sent him away after our first little date. And he wrote me a poem. And he ended up courting me through poetry and sending me a set of Lincoln logs to build a relationship, and he was very creative. Somehow the creative side of him came out with this.
And he would send you a poem on every anniversary.
Well, that's what I said. I wasn't going to marry him because I wouldn't get any more poems. He said, I promise I will give you one. So I have 21 poems. So, but it was
a nice
it was an
story.
interesting marriage. We had the 3 teenagers, 14, 15, and 16. I taught 1 year of school, and I thought I can handle that. So.
And then how long before he became a Baha'i?
Oh, he became a Baha'i before I married him.
Oh, he did?
I said I won't make this mistake twice.
So if you wanted to continue that story, because I know part of my question was the difficulty of both of you losing a husband, and I know it was quite a shock.
Yes, the comment that I meant to say is that having gone through both a divorce and a loss of a spouse, I think a divorce is harder.
Really?
Yes. Because you always feel some level of guilt in, did you do enough? You know, could you, I was the Baha'i, you know. We didn't have children, but could I have done a better job of keeping this marriage together? And you're helpless in the case of death of a spouse.
Yes. Goodness.
So,
Ron was director of Bosch when he passed away, correct?
yes.
And you were...
We had been asked, that's a good story too,
Go ahead.
because Bosch didn't have an administrator, and they wanted to put educators at all the schools. They had the Johnsons at Lou Helen, and they wanted to have people with educational background as the directors of the school. So they had had an ad in the American Baha'i for months, maybe a year, and we weren't paying attention to it. Ron was the school superintendent, I was the school principal. We were happy. We were doing our jobs. So we got a call from the National Spiritual Assembly, and they asked us to quit our jobs and go run Bosch. So we did.
What year was that?
Well, that would have been, he died in 93. It would have been in 91, probably. Because starting in November of 91, we were getting ready, painting the administrator's house and going up on weekends. And then we actually moved in February of 92. He died in January of 93.
So he was diagnosed and passed away pretty rapidly?
Oh, he was diagnosed in 88.
Oh.
He had signs of it. He had, by the time that they did it, it had probably already started to metastasize. So.
Well, given now that we're talking about education,
Uh-huh.
I'd like to ask both of you what you could share regarding the idea of raising Baha'is, whether it's our own children or educating them. What are some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you could share that you feel from your experience and wisdom that's points of success or that work that you've observed?
Well, the first person after Ron to become a Baha'i in his family was Linda, who was turning 15. And she wanted Shahryar Jam, who was on the San Jose Assembly, we were living in San Jose, to come to her 15th birthday, and she signed her card. And then they all became Baha'is, except the oldest, Mike. And it was, we taught them the faith, as far as that goes. But in those days, there wasn't a lot. I married him in 70, so it was the early 70s. And everything was firesides or big proclamation meetings. I'm not even sure we had a local youth committee where we were. But this was up in San Jose.
So that's related to another question. We can go back to the question about raising, but the idea of a change in culture. We talked about the death of the guardian, what a test that was for so many people. I think I've read that when Abdu'l-Baha passed away, 50% of the American Baha'i community left the faith because they were attached to a personality.
Really?
So we've had a big change in culture relative to how we're educating ourselves. With
the institute process.
And that's been a challenge for a lot of people. So maybe you could speak about that as part of my other question about raising Baha'is.
I think this is really a question of understanding that it's a process. Baha'i identity is a process, and the best way to understand that process is to be out in the field actually doing something, either teaching the faith or doing children's classes or working with the youth, doing study groups, something that has you totally involved in the educational process. And we came from a culture, the turning point was in 1996, and when the House of Justice really changed how we looked at things, and the whole institute process, training institutes, everything came about that time. And it's true, it's like moving a huge ship and changing course. And there's a lot of fallout, and a lot of people fall off the ship, and others cling, but it's part of the growing up.
And how do you feel this change in culture or this new process helps then with raising of Baha'is?
I think it's very important. And serving now as I do on the regional council, very interested in the building of Baha'i community and involving the greater community. Shoghi Effendi in Principles of Baha'i Administration talked about the fact that when a local spiritual assembly meets, they need to remember that they are not just the assembly of the small Baha'i community. They are the spiritual center of that entire city. And I think if when assemblies meet, they thought that way, prayed that way, that we might see some changes happening. I don't think we call on the concourse enough.
You happen to mention Ron's poems. I know, Sheila, you've been quite an accomplished
Oh,
poet.
she's the poetess.
And you've written many book reviews, articles, and maybe as we begin to wind down the interview, I know probably your most famous poem, the one that I think over 1 million copies have been, is Life's Rainbow. And part of the ending of that poem, you say, endings are always indigo before we step on the other shore. So as you approach this time of life, how are your lives?
Oh, because we're in our 80s.
How are your endings indigo right now? In what way are you wearing indigo tonight, which is nice. But it's a great line. Endings are indigo. And how does it now seem? Because you wrote it when you were much younger.
Yes.
So how do you see this time of life right now?
She wrote me a poem about Ron.
Yeah.
And I will cry. I don't know it by heart, but
I don't know it by heart either, so I can't recite it.
But she is a great poetess.
My goodness. You mentioned that poem, Life's Rainbow, because it was published in an anthology that became a sort of cult classic, and has sold over 1.5 million copies, unbelievably, because poetry doesn't sell on that scale. The use of that poem by people who don't realize that a Baha'i wrote it, who have no knowledge of the faith, but who somehow reacted to that poem. I have had over the years, I've forgotten, it was published in the 80s, mid to late 1980s, and I have had letters requesting permission to use that poem by National Catholic
Yeah, that's one I remember.
priests who wanted to put it, and apparently did, as part of their Eucharist. Now, I'm not a practicing Christian, so I don't understand how they could do that, but they did. I've had nurses say we're using it in our hospice care work, in hospital work, and so forth. Had artists say, because they like the imagery, this poem, can I use it in my book for whatever purpose? Things far away from the usual uses, perhaps, of poetry. And this has brought me a lot of happiness, pleasure.
If I'm not mistaken, you began writing poetry with the crisis in Iran, right?
Yes, that's right. First poem I wrote was because of desperation on hearing of the killing of Baha'is in Iran. And I didn't even know if what I wrote would be considered a poem. I sent it to Roger White.
It's free verse.
Roger White, who I considered a wonderful poet. And I said, is this a poem? So that was the beginning, and that was in the early 80s.
Was that the one he showed your mother in Haifa?
No, I don't think so.
That was another one, okay.
No, yeah.
So let me ask you back to the question then about endings or indigo. What would you say then, as you look back, would you feel have been like perhaps your biggest challenges, your biggest tests?
I think what you forget is the emphasis not on the indigo, but on the arrival at the other shore. When you think of the traditional view of the rainbow, what's at the end of the rainbow?
Pot of gold.
The pot of gold. I mean, this is the thing you want. So for me in writing it, my emphasis was not on the loneliness or the sadness at the end, that comes often at the end of life, but on the destination, which is eternal life, and the so-called pot of gold.
Well, you both have lost a lot of loved ones, and so it must give, if we can just sort of wind up with that.
Right, I don't mind dying because I know more people who've passed on that I'm close to than are here.
Yeah. Death is a natural part of life. We're dying from the moment we're born, so.
It's a process of detachment from the time you're born.
Well, thank you so much for sharing these memories today.
Our pleasure. Yeah.